My name is Natalie Turner. I'm 26 years old now, but there are nights when I still feel 17 standing under a flickering streetlight outside a nearly empty bus station, rain soaking through my sneakers, holding an envelope that weighed more than anything I'd ever carried. It was early evening, the sky the color of wet concrete. My mother handed me the envelope without ceremony, like she was passing me a receipt she didn't need anymore. Her mascara was perfect. Her lipstick hadn't smudged. She looked composed in that way she always did when she'd already made up her mind. Her eyes didn't linger on my face. They passed right through me, as if I were already gone. I remember staring at the cheap paper and thinking maybe stupidly that this was some kind of last-minute gesture. A birthday card. A letter. Advice she hadn't known how to give before. But when I opened it, there were only two $20 bills and a torn scrap of notebook paper folded in half. 6 words written in her familiar cursive. "Don't call us. This is tough love." Then she turned around. Her heels clicked against the wet concrete, sharp and final, and she walked back to the car without looking over her shoulder. My father didn't get out. He didn't roll down the window. The car pulled away, taillights bleeding red into the drizzle, and I was left standing there with a duffel bag, $40, and the sudden, horrifying understanding that my parents hadn't just punished me. They had erased me. That moment still burns. It flares up when I see parents hugging their kids at airports, or when someone talks casually about going home for the holidays. It tightens my chest when I lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of an apartment I built for myself, wondering how something that happened 9 years ago can still feel so raw. To understand how it got there, you have to understand my family. On paper, we looked perfect. 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. My dad ran his own contracting business. My mom worked part-time at a dental office. We even had a golden retriever named Rusty, who chased squirrels and knocked over trash cans like clockwork. Holiday photos, birthday cakes, summer pool parties. If you flip through our albums, you'd think we were one of those families with matching pajamas and a group chat full of heart emojis. But if you watched closely, you'd see the cracks. I was the oldest. Then came my younger sister, Brianna, 2 years after me. And then the twins, Madeline and Mason, 6 years later, golden and untouchable. Brianna always got 2 gifts when I got one. The twins got away with anything, and I got lectures. "You're the oldest, Natalie," my dad would say. "Set an example." That line followed me everywhere. Brianna snuck out and got grounded for one night. The twins broke things and laughed it off. If the sink dripped or the door was unlocked, it was somehow my fault. At first it was subtle. A missed school recital. A forgotten birthday. Easy to brush off. But as I got older, it stopped feeling accidental. It felt intentional. I wasn't a bad kid. I worked part-time at the gas station down the street. I stayed out of trouble. I did fine in school. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, they'd finally see me. Not just look at me, but see me. They never did. Things really started to unravel during the fall of my senior year. College applications were coming up, and I was picking up extra shifts to save for fees, because my parents had already made their position clear. "If you want to go," my dad said one night while loading the dishwasher, "you'll figure it out yourself. No one paid my way." Fair enough. I wasn't asking for a free ride. But a week later, I overheard my mom talking to Brianna in the living room about setting aside money for her future plans. I froze on the stairs, listening as if someone had poured ice water down my spine. The next day I asked calmly, "Are you helping Brianna with college?" My mom's eyes narrowed. My dad didn't look up from his plate. "She's got a plan," he said. "Something practical. We're helping her get started." "I have a plan too," I said. "Computer science. I've already lined up scholarships." Mom shrugged. "That's nice, Natalie. But we've already done a lot for you. It's time you learn to stand on your own." As if I hadn't been doing that my whole life. Still, I didn't break. I worked harder, applied to every scholarship I could find, fixed up an old laptop from a thrift store so I could write essays at night. I was exhausted, but there was something stubborn inside me that refused to die. Then came the fight. Mason borrowed my earbuds and broke them again. When I told him he needed to replace them, he laughed. "Why, you're leaving soon anyway." Something snapped. I yelled. He yelled. Brianna jumped in. My dad stormed into the room, and without asking what happened, told me to get out if I was going to act like a selfish brat. I slept at a friend's house that night. 2 days later, my mom called and told me to come home and pack. When I got there, my room was already half empty. My clothes were stuffed into a duffel bag. The laptop I'd fixed was gone. My dad claimed it was his because he paid the electric bill. And then they drove me to the bus station. No goodbye, no hug, just the envelope. I sat on that bench for an hour rereading those 6 words until they blurred. Then I boarded the first bus I could afford, not knowing where it was going, only that staying wasn't an option anymore. That was the day they erased me, and it was also the day everything started. The bus took me 2 cities over. I didn't know anyone there. I didn't even know the street names. I just knew it was far enough that no one would recognize me, far enough that I wouldn't run into someone who knew my parents and asked polite questions I couldn't answer without breaking apart. I counted my money 3 times before I got off. $40. I treated it like it was fragile glass. No taxis, no restaurants. I walked until my legs ached and my shoes soaked through, then finally texted the one person who'd said, "If you ever need somewhere to crash, let me know." Her name was Clara, a girl I'd sat next to in chemistry class junior year. We weren't close. We weren't friends in the way people imagine friends. But she replied anyway. "You can take the couch. It's not great, but it's yours." That couch became my entire world. The first few weeks blurred together. I showered quickly so I wouldn't take up space. I folded my clothes the moment they dried. I learned how to exist quietly, how to be grateful without becoming invisible. During the day, I walked into every restaurant and shop within a mile, asking if they were hiring. At night, I lay awake listening to Clara's roommates laugh in the next room, telling myself not to cry, because crying felt too close to giving up. I got a job washing dishes at a diner off the highway. Grease under my nails, back aching by the end of every shift. It paid minimum wage and sometimes a free slice of pie if the manager was in a good mood. I took it without complaint. Pride wasn't paying rent. A month later, I moved into a shared studio with 3 strangers. One mattress on the floor, one bathroom that never quite felt clean. But it was mine. I stopped being a guest. That mattered more than I expected. I enrolled in online courses at night. Free ones at first. Programming tutorials I watched with my laptop balanced on my knees, headphones crackling. I was always tired. I was always behind. But something strange happened. In that exhaustion, my anger sharpened. It stopped being loud. It stopped being wild. It became focused. I wasn't doing this to prove anything to my parents. I told myself that every day. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and my roommates were asleep, I imagined them finding out one day. Imagined their surprise. Imagined their regret. I hated that part of myself for needing it. I hated that even after everything, they still lived in my head. That was around the time I met Ethan. He came into the diner one night with a group of coworkers, all loud and exhausted in that specific way people are after surviving something together. He smiled at me when I refilled his coffee, not in a way that asked for anything, just in a way that noticed. When I dropped a fork and muttered an apology, he said, "Hey, you're doing great," like it was the most obvious fact in the world. He came back the next week, and the week after that. Eventually, he asked my name. I told him. He didn't ask why I worked so much. He didn't ask about my family. He talked about his job, about how he was trying to figure out what came next, about how adulthood felt like a series of unfinished conversations. When he asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime, it didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a pause. We took things slow, painfully slow. I didn't know how to let someone see me when everything in my life felt temporary. But Ethan didn't push. He showed up. He remembered small things. He asked how my day went and waited for the answer. When I finally told him months later about the bus station, the envelope, the 6 words, he didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just said, "That shouldn't have happened to you," and for the first time, someone else said it out loud. By 23, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I landed a junior role doing tech support for a small startup. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better, and it came with health insurance that felt like a luxury. I worked days, studied nights, built tiny projects that no one saw except me. I kept my head down. I learned everything I could. By 25, I had something of my own, a consulting business that started as late-night freelance work and turned into contracts. Clients, an office that smelled like coffee and new paint. I signed my name on documents and felt my hands shake, not from fear, but from disbelief. I didn't tell my parents. They didn't ask. For a while, it felt like I'd outrun them, like the past was something sealed behind glass. I had my own apartment, my own car, a man who knew how to sit with silence. I wasn't just alive, I was okay. Then one quiet afternoon, my inbox refreshed. And there it was, an email from my mother. Subject line: "Hey stranger, can we talk?" My hands hovered over the keyboard the way they had 9 years earlier, shaking like I was 17 again. standing under a flickering streetlight with $40 and nowhere to go. I didn't open it. Not yet. I left the email unopened for 3 days. Not because I didn't see it. I saw it every time I opened my inbox, sitting there like it owned the place. Hey, stranger. 2 words that felt rehearsed, casual, almost playful. As if she hadn't last spoken to me by handing me an envelope and driving away. Ethan noticed before I said anything. "You're checking your phone like it might bite you," he said one night while we ate takeout on the couch. I shrugged. Just work. He didn't call me out. He never did. But when I finally opened the email, I was alone. It was short. Too short. "Natalie, I know it's been a long time and I don't expect you to forgive us overnight, but I've been thinking a lot about the past, about where things went wrong. Brianna misses you. So do the twins. Your father, well, he's trying. We'd like to see you again. Maybe rebuild what we had. Let me know. Love, Mom." Rebuild what we had. I laughed. It came out sharp and ugly, nothing like humor. My apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge, the soft city noise outside. I sat there rereading the words, trying to find the apology that never came. There was regret, sure, but no ownership. No, we hurt you. No, we were wrong. Just things went wrong. I didn't reply. The next morning there was another email. Then a text from a number I hadn't saved, but recognized immediately. Brianna's writing voice was unmistakable. "Heard you're doing big things. Proud of you, big sis." Big sis! Like she hadn't stood in the driveway 9 years earlier, arms crossed, saying, "Maybe this is for the best." I stared at the message longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to block them all, shut the door for good. But another part, quieter, darker, wanted to know why now. 2 days later, another email arrived. This one was an invitation. The twins were graduating college, a private university upstate. There were photos attached, balloons, custom cakes matching sweatshirts, family portraits with sunlight filtering through trees. The kind of celebration I'd never been invited to, not even when I graduated high school. My name wasn't mentioned, and yet suddenly they wanted me there. I almost deleted it. Almost. Instead, I replied with one sentence. "You want to rebuild? Start by telling me why you buried me." Then I waited. No response for 2 days. On the 3rd day, Brianna called. I let it go to voicemail. "Natalie," her voice said, careful, strained. "I know you're upset. Mom didn't expect you to be so cold, but I told her you've been through a lot. We all have. Maybe we could just meet. Talk. You'd be surprised how much has changed." Changed. That word stuck with me. Not fixed, not owned, just rearranged. Then my father emailed. "Natalie, I hear you've made something of yourself. That's good. I always knew you had potential. Maybe we didn't do everything right when you were younger, but we had our reasons. Things were different back then. Brianna says you're still holding on to anger. Maybe it's time to let that go. Come see us. Dad." He wrote like he was giving feedback on a mediocre performance review. No apology, just justification wrapped in authority. I didn't reply. A week later, I drove past my old neighborhood. I told myself it was coincidence. It wasn't. The house looked the same. White siding, red shutters, cracked driveway. But there was a new luxury SUV parked out front with a vanity plate I didn't recognize. I slowed down despite myself. Madeline stepped outside, laughing into her phone, coffee in hand. For a moment, I imagined rolling down the window and saying something, anything. But what would I even say? "Hey, remember me?" I drove away. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Heard you were in town. You should have stopped by. We saved a slice of cake." No name, no emoji, but I knew exactly who it was. That was when my stomach dropped. This wasn't nostalgia. This wasn't regret. They were watching. And the moment I realized that the phone rang again. This time it wasn't family. "Hi, is this Natalie Turner?" a woman asked, her voice professional but cautious. "My name is Carla. I'm calling from First Horizon Bank." "Yes," I said slowly. "I'm calling because we received a joint account application submitted under your name. There are some unusual details we need to verify." My pulse spiked. A joint account. "Yes, it lists you and a Linda Turner. She claimed to be your mother." The room seemed to tilt. "She also submitted documentation that doesn't quite match our records. I just wanted to confirm. Did you authorize this?" "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not." There was a pause. Then quietly, "That's what I thought." She explained they'd flagged the account, that it would be reported. Then she added something that made my hands go numb. "She attempted to use your EIN to add herself as a co-signer on a corporate account." When the call ended, I sat there staring at my phone. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were trying to access me. And suddenly, every email, every message, every fake apology rearranged itself into something far more dangerous. That night, I poured a glass of scotch and didn't drink it. I just stared out at the city lights, listening to echoes of their voices in my head. Something had shifted. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the woman from the bank say she claimed to be your mother, in that careful, lowered tone people use when they already know the answer. I kept replaying it, the way her voice dipped, the way she hadn't sounded surprised. Like this wasn't the first call of its kind she'd made. By morning, my apartment looked the way my head felt, quiet, tense, untouched. The scotch was still on the counter where I'd left it, untouched, a small symbol of restraint I didn't feel strong enough to acknowledge. Ethan noticed immediately. "You didn't come to bed," he said gently. "I couldn't," I replied. "Something's wrong." I told him everything. The emails, the messages, the bank call. I expected anger. I expected disbelief. What I got was concern so steady it almost scared me. "They're trying to use you," he said after a long pause. Not asking. Stating. I nodded. "They already are." That was the moment the past stopped being memory and became a threat. For days, I walked through my life like it was made of glass. I double-checked locks. I reread emails for subtext. I replayed conversations I'd had years ago, wondering what else I'd missed. I'd built my company from nothing. Long nights, skipped meals, relentless focus. And now it all felt fragile, like one wrong move could crack it open. I stopped sleeping properly. I canceled meetings. My team noticed. Once I walked past the break room and heard voices drop. "She seems off lately," someone whispered. They weren't wrong. Then the envelope arrived. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I knew too well. My stomach twisted before I even picked it up. I stood in the hallway for a full minute, staring at it like it might explode. Inside was a photograph. Me at around 9 years old, standing in the backyard with Rusty, our golden retriever, holding a model rocket I'd built from scratch. I was grinning proud, hopeful. On the back, written in faded ink, "You always were our little engineer. Mom." I dropped it. Not because it shocked me, but because it felt like a warning. Like proof that no matter how far I'd gone, they still thought they owned pieces of me. Memories, narratives, my name. That night I didn't drink. I didn't cry. I made a list. Step 1, secure my life. I met with my legal team and locked everything down. Banking credentials, ownership structures, multi-factor authentication on everything that mattered. We restructured assets, tightened access, created walls where I'd once relied on trust. Step 2, understand the scope. Because if they'd tried once, they'd tried before. I started digging not recklessly, not emotionally, quietly, methodically. I pulled credit reports, checked business filings, looked for anomalies, patterns. That was when I realized something worse. They weren't just opportunistic. They were practiced. Around that time, I spiraled. I stopped going into the office. I worked from home, if you could call it that. Staring at spreadsheets without seeing numbers, reading the same email 10 times without processing it. Takeout containers piled up untouched. I stopped replying to texts. Even Ethan's patience had edges. "You don't have to do this alone," he said one night. I know, I answered. But knowing and believing are different things. I thought I'd hit rock bottom at 17, counting coins for vending machine dinners, calling shelters from a prepaid phone. But this felt worse, because now I had something, and they still wanted to take it. That realization broke something open. It forced me to remember the people who had helped me when my family wouldn't. Clara's couch, the diner manager who slipped me extra shifts, a college friend who let me stay for months without asking questions, mentors who answered cold emails just because they could. I'd spent years proving I didn't need anyone. Now I needed to remember who deserved to be here. I started therapy. Her name was Lydia. She didn't coddle me. She didn't romanticize resilience. She asked questions that landed like blunt objects. "Who are you trying to punish?" she asked once. "I'm trying to protect myself," I said. "Then act like it," she replied. That was the shift. I stopped wanting reactions. I stopped wanting apologies. I wanted control. A week later, my phone buzzed while I was in my office staring out at the city. "There's a woman here," my assistant said carefully. "She says she's your sister." My breath caught. Brianna was standing in the lobby, and the look on her face told me she wasn't here to pretend anymore. I told my assistant to give me 30 minutes. Not because I needed time to prepare, but because I needed control. I finished my call with the client, closed my laptop, and sat very still until my heartbeat slowed to something manageable. Then I stepped into the hallway. Brianna looked smaller than I remembered. Same blonde hair, same carefully practiced smile, but it didn't sit right on her face anymore. There were shadows under her eyes. She wore a blazer that didn't quite match her heels, like she'd dressed for authority and apology at the same time. Natalie, she said softly, like saying my name too loudly might shatter something. I didn't answer. I know you probably don't want to see me, she continued. But I swear I didn't know about the bank thing. That wasn't me. I studied her face. For once, she wasn't performing. Across the street, I said finally, 30 minutes. Not here. She nodded immediately. Relief flickered across her face. The cafe was half empty when I arrived. Sunlight spilled through the windows, hitting the floor like it had no idea what was about to come out of her mouth. Brianna was already seated, stirring a cappuccino she hadn't touched. She'd changed into a sweater and jeans, something familiar, something softer. You look different, she said when I sat down. So do you. She winced. Fair. We sat in silence until she broke. You asked why they buried you, she said. I'm here to tell you. I folded my arms. Go on. That night, she said slowly, Mom told us it was your choice to leave. My stomach tightened. She said you wanted independence, that you were crashing with friends. She showed us a note, said you wrote it. My jaw clenched. That note was hers. I know, Brianna said quickly. I know that now. But back then, we believed her. She said you were flunking school, stealing money, lying, that you couldn't handle responsibility. I wasn't. I know, she said again. This time it sounded heavier. She kept your phone, Brianna continued. Told us you didn't want it anymore. Told us not to contact you because it would drag us into your drama. I let out a short laugh. It wasn't amused. And you believed all of that. I was 16, she said quietly. I didn't know how to push back. I thought if you really wanted to talk to me, you'd find a way. With $40 and nowhere to live, I snapped. Forgive me if reconnecting wasn't top priority. She flinched. You're right, I deserve that. That silence sat heavier than the earlier ones. Why now, I asked. She hesitated. Then, a few years ago, I started seeing your name online. Articles. Startups. It didn't match the story we'd been told. The dropout. The screw-up. You were thriving, and you still never reached out. Because I was tired, I said. And because every time I tried, I got punished for it. She nodded. I know. That's when I started asking questions. She looked at me, then not with guilt, but resolve. I left 2 years ago, she said. Moved out. Cut contact. I blinked. You what? Mom lost it. Said I was ungrateful. Said I was turning into you. She gave a humorless smile. I guess that was the worst thing she could imagine. What are you doing now? I asked. I work for a nonprofit, she said, helping kids aging out of foster care. That hit harder than I expected. She leaned forward and lowered her voice. You're not the only one Mom tried to use. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small black notebook, setting it gently between us. What's that? I asked. Proof. Inside were photocopies, screenshots, handwritten notes, bank statements, emails, loan applications. One document jumped out immediately. A joint business loan application using my name and EIN. Signed in my father's handwriting. My stomach dropped. They tried 3 times, Brianna said. Different banks, different details. Enough to avoid immediate flags. I looked up sharply. Why do you have this? Because they did the same thing to me, she said. Took out a loan in my name after I left. $10,000. I didn't know until collections called. I sat back stunned. I reported it, she continued. It took months to fix. After that, I started watching them, quietly, collecting. For revenge. For truth, she said. And maybe justice. I closed the notebook. You know what this means, I said. If we move forward, there's no undoing it. She met my gaze without blinking. They already burned me. I'm not afraid of the fire anymore. Something shifted then. Not anger, not relief. Alignment. Okay, I said. Then we do this right. Outside, the sunlight kept shining like nothing had changed. But everything had. Once Brianna walked out of that cafe, the past stopped being something I reacted to and became something I managed. I didn't move fast, I moved carefully. The first thing I did was protect what I had built. Not emotionally, legally. My attorneys didn't ask many questions once I showed them the documents from Brianna's notebook. They just got very quiet, very focused. We locked everything down. Ownership structures, banking access, internal permissions, multi-factor authentication on every system that mattered. I separated personal assets from company assets so cleanly it felt surgical. Anything that could be touched, forged, or exploited was sealed behind walls of verification and legal language so dense it made my head hurt. For the first time since the bank call, I slept. Not well, but enough. Step 2 was confirmation. I didn't want suspicion. I wanted certainty. I hired a private investigator. Not the dramatic kind from movies, but the meticulous kind who cross-references signatures, verifies timelines, and doesn't jump to conclusions. I handed over Brianna's notebook and told him one thing. Assume everything is real. Prove it anyway. What came back was worse than I expected. Multiple attempted loan applications, minor variations in personal data, patterns that showed intent, not desperation. This wasn't a one-off. It was a system, a habit, something they'd done before and expected to keep doing. When the investigator laid it all out on the table, I felt something cold settle in my chest. They hadn't reached out because they missed me. They reached out because I was valuable again. That night, Ethan asked me a question Lydia had warned me about. Are you doing this to protect yourself, he said carefully, or to punish them? I thought about it for a long time. I'm doing this so they can never touch me again, I said, and I meant it. The next step was information control. I called in a favor from a journalist I'd met years earlier at a tech conference. She'd followed my company's growth quietly professionally. I trusted her not to sensationalize what didn't need it. I want to tell a story, I said. No names, not yet. She listened, asked smart questions, cross-checked facts. When she agreed, I felt something loosen in my chest. The article wasn't about me. It was about patterns. Tough love that turned into abandonment. Financial abuse disguised as discipline. Parents who cut off their children only to chase them down when they succeeded anyway. My story was there but anonymized, threaded through others like it. The title was simple. Thrown Away, When Tough Love Becomes Financial Abuse. It went live on a Thursday morning. By Friday night, it was everywhere. Comments flooded in. Thousands of them. Stories that mirrored mine so closely it felt unreal. People who'd been dropped, erased, rewritten. People who never got an apology. And then inevitably, someone leaked the names. I didn't stop it. I didn't start it either. The fallout was immediate. My mother was asked to resign from the dental clinic after coworkers recognized the details. Apparently, she'd bragged about her tech genius daughter more than once, just without mentioning the part where she tried to steal from me. My father's contracting business imploded under bad press and worse reviews. Clients backed out. Suppliers stopped answering calls. He tried to explain, tried to reframe it as a misunderstanding. But receipts don't misunderstand. While all of that was happening, I made one quiet move that mattered more than any headline. I found out the house, the one they kicked me out of, was 3 months behind on mortgage payments. Second loan underwater, property taxes overdue, utilities stacked. They were bleeding. Through a third-party investment firm I occasionally worked with, I made an offer. Cash, silent partner, no names attached. 2 weeks later, I owned the lien on my parents' house. When I told Brianna, she cried not out of revenge, but relief. For once, she said they don't get to decide how this ends. Neither did I. Not yet. There was still one person I hadn't spoken to, and what he said would decide how far I was willing to go. My father called from a blocked number on a Tuesday afternoon. I let it ring twice before answering long enough for him to wonder if I would. Natalie Turner, I said evenly. There was a pause, then his voice older, rougher, but unmistakable. It's your dad. I leaned back in my chair and stared out at the city, the glass reflecting a version of myself I barely recognized from 9 years earlier. I figured, I said. I hear you've been talking to Brianna, he continued, that you're digging into things. Loans, documents, stories. His voice tightened. She says you're trying to destroy us. I'm not trying to destroy you, I replied calmly. I'm just not protecting you anymore. Another pause. He cleared his throat. We made mistakes, he said, but we're still your family. You don't get to erase that. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. You're right. I don't have to erase anything. You already did. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. You think the world's going to take your side, he finally snapped. You think strangers online know us better than we know ourselves. I think the truth doesn't need my help, I said. It just needs light. He hung up. The next morning, the story exploded. My friend's article had already gained traction, but now it was everywhere. People shared it with captions like, "This happened to me, and we need to talk about this more." Advocacy groups picked it up. Podcasts reached out. The narrative shifted from gossip to pattern. And then the name stuck. My mother's resignation became public. The dental clinic confirmed it, quietly citing reputational concerns. My father's business listings flooded with reviews referencing the article. Contracts were canceled. Suppliers went silent. He tried to fight it. He couldn't. Then came the letter. A certified envelope outlining the debt, the transfer of lien ownership, and the auction date, if payments weren't made within 30 days. They ignored it. So the auction happened. I sat in my car across the street, engine idling, windows tinted. I watched my parents stand on the sidewalk, red-faced and furious, arguing with people who didn't care how long they'd lived there or how unfair they thought it was. "Nobody kicks a family out like this," my mother shouted. Someone already had. The house sold that afternoon. To me. Officially, it was purchased by a holding company layered through trusts and shell entities. Clean, legal, quiet. I didn't walk up to them. I didn't announce myself. I didn't need the satisfaction. The satisfaction came later. A week after the auction, I sent 3 letters. One to my mother, one to my father, one to the house they no longer owned. Inside each envelope was a copy of the restraining order I'd filed after the bank incident. Attached beneath it was the closing summary from the auction. And on top, a single handwritten note. "Don't call me. This isn't tough love. This is closure." When Brianna helped me box up the last remaining items from the house, old photos, tools from the garage, a broken science fair trophy. From when I was 10, I felt nothing but quiet. I didn't keep the trophy. I didn't need proof of who I'd been anymore. The house was empty in a way that felt intentional, not abandoned, finished. Sunlight came through the windows without resistance, landing on bare floors where furniture used to sit. The air smelled faintly of dust and old paint, the kind of smell that lingers after a life has been packed into boxes and driven away. Brianna moved quietly through the rooms, opening closets, checking drawers, careful not to touch more than she had to. "This feels strange," she said softly. "Like the house knows." I understood what she meant. That house had always felt like it belonged to someone else anyway, even when I lived there, even when my name was still spoken without bitterness. We worked quickly, no sentimentality, a few photo albums, some tools from the garage that had technically been mine, one framed picture of Rusty that Brianna insisted on keeping because he loved you the most. I didn't argue. In my old bedroom, the walls were bare except for faint outlines where posters used to hang. I stood there for a long moment, hands in my pockets, breathing in the quiet. I expected something: anger, sadness, triumph. What I felt instead was distance. That version of me, the girl who waited for approval, who believed silence meant patience, who thought love could be earned, she wasn't here anymore. She hadn't been for a long time. When we finished, I locked the door and slid the keys into my pocket. That night, back in my apartment, I slept without dreams. In the months that followed, I stopped checking alerts. I didn't need updates on my parents' lives or the wreckage they left behind. The restraining order did its job. Silence returned, not the sharp kind I grew up with, but a clean, chosen one. My company grew. We moved into a larger office. I hired 2 more engineers. I trusted people again slowly. I delegated. I stopped measuring my worth in quarterly reports and public perception. Ethan stayed. Through the mess, through the planning, through the aftermath. He never asked me to forgive. He never asked me to forget. He just built a future with me in a way that felt steady and real. Brianna and I talked regularly, sometimes about logistics, sometimes about nothing at all. We both started therapy separately and laughed once about how uncomfortable it was to realize we'd grown up thinking survival was the same thing as love. Some nights I still dream of the bus station. In the dream, it's raining. I'm 17 again, holding an envelope that feels heavier than it should. But the ending is different now. I don't watch them walk away. I turn first. I walk forward. The last time I went back to the house, movers were loading the final boxes into a truck. I stood on the porch for a moment before leaving and flicked the light switch by the door. I left the porch light on. Not for them. For the version of me who never stopped believing she deserved better. She was right, and she finally got it.